Hello, welcome back. Andrew's allowed me back on the podcast, so I've been allowed to do the intro and the outro. I hope you had a good Christmas and New Year. I am recording this in January of 2025, and I had hoped to record this intro on a lovely walk through the woodlands of East Fife, but the wind is blowing a hoolie, and all I could get picked up on the mic was just sort of, and then the occasional word. So I'm back inside. But to bring you this week, it's a chat we had back in December, or Andrew had more accurately, with Erin Eleuterio from Second Act Fit Pros. Now, Erin was introduced to us by Shelby, who was also on our podcast. Erin does some really interesting work and has been working with older adults in physical activity for much longer than we have. She trained in, she got her PK Silver, which is kind of parkour for older populations or over 50s, I think. And she now runs parkour-based full resilience classes for older adults in senior living communities and local senior centres. The conversation between Andrew and Erin I found was really interesting, and a bit that I really enjoyed was when they talked about the kind of embedded understandings of what we are capable of doing as we get older. Or we have these kind of embedded assumptions of, well, I'm old, so I won't be able to do this, and it runs deep, and it is a barrier that sort of needs to be unpicked or addressed in different ways. It's a very interesting chat, and I really enjoyed listening back to it. So we will jump straight in, and at the end, I'll come back for a bit more waffle, and then I'll leave you on your merry way. See you soon.
How to stand on shifting sand. How to bend but stay intact.
Okay, I'm here today with Erin Eleuterio, and we already had a nice conversation a few weeks ago. We were put in touch via Shelby at Force of Nature, and a lot of the conversation that Shelby and I had at the end, she's like, "Oh, you really, really need to talk to Erin." And then Erin reached out to us because she wanted to have a conversation, and we just ended up having a really great talk. And I just thought it'd be really nice if next time I spoke with Erin, if we could get her on the podcast, just because she's got this great experience and she really, I think, has a very good perspective in working with populations with different backgrounds and ages. So I just wanted to get her on and kind of pick her brain about what she does. So Erin, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation. I did a little happy dance when you reached out to me. I was
Yeah,
really
I
excited
mean,
to be on.
your stuff is great, and I always mention this when people do it, but you maintain, I think, a very good and active blog. And for me, that's I'm not really on social media, so that's one of the ways I really try to get to know people is either through their blog or their podcast. And I think you have a really good mix of sort of in-depth articles and just shorter articles, sort of food for thought kind of things. So it's one of those things for anyone who's listening, I would definitely recommend go ahead and check out your blog. And you do have a good social media presence. And you also, well, I guess I'll let you talk for yourself. So who are you and what are you currently doing, or how might people know you online?
Yeah, so online, I am the creator of Second Act Fit Pros podcast, and I built a community called Second Act Fit Pros. My podcast is all about people who are doing new and innovative things for the over 50 population and helping them stay physically active. I also interview people that have taken on a second act career in helping people stay active later in life and the ways that people are doing it, whether it's rock climbing, dance, or otherwise. And my community is built around professionals that are working with the over 50 demographic, and they're all committed to that population. And many of them are my podcast guests. And we are looking at new and innovative ways to keep people active, but also really making sure that we're looking at the individual and addressing all those psychosocial aspects of working with people. And I think it's something that gets overlooked in fitness. So that's what I do online. And I have a presence mostly on LinkedIn. I do share some on Instagram and Facebook, and it's mostly promotion for my podcasts. But outside of my online presence is I work with older adults at a senior living community and at a senior center. So I teach classes there. I actually just became an activities director for the senior center nearby. So I'm doing that now, as well as podcasting and leading this community. So all the things related to helping the over 50 population stay active.
Cool. And when I was looking at some of your stuff, I came across, and I don't want to put you on the spot to memorize it, but I thought it was good. You published a bit of a manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just wondering if you kind of talk about that, some of your core tenets, or sort of, some of your guiding beliefs and what you try to do.
Yeah, sure. So we created a manifesto for our community as a North Star about what we're about and what we're for. And it's really about nurturing people's autonomy and agency, letting them, explore physical activity that is meaningful for them, and not defining wellness as like being fit and disease free, but it's really engaging in life meaningfully, regardless of physical challenges. And we're really about addressing ageism in this industry and addressing stereotypes that are put on older adults in regards to physical activity, and really not putting shame around growing older, and really making it something that we celebrate. And we are about getting people outside and play and fun and connection and all of those things that I just don't see a lot of. I don't see it really being highlighted within the fitness industry. And that's really what we should be about. We are promoting physical activity and honoring the individuals.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of really good points there that I want to kind of jump off from, because a lot of what you do really overlaps with what we try to do as well. But I thought at the beginning, when you're talking about, you mentioned about, these concepts of autonomy and agency. And that's one of the things I really think about as well. I was wondering if we could kind of unpack that a little bit in terms of, the fact that you chose autonomy and agency as being one of your important, guiding principles, kind of suggests to me that you observed in the fitness industry or the sector that perhaps that's not always a focus. Can you kind of talk a little bit about why you think that's important?
Yeah, I think it's so important. Again, this is part about recognizing the individual. And as we engage in physical activities later in life, we've had more years on this planet. So we've had more years to accumulate injuries, maybe have fear around certain movements. Maybe we just have a background with physical activity or have a relationship with exercise that is different based on, our culture's views on how we reframe exercise. Everybody's coming to a physical activity with all of that in the background, whether you want to call it baggage or not. And so it's really about giving them opportunities to be physically active with lots of options and lots of choices, and letting them make the choices that they want, that they feel are appropriate for their bodies. And this can happen in making this invitation happen in language a lot. So I talk
Right.
a lot about language and how we talk about physical activity. So it's not so much like, oh, if you can't do this, you're going to need to modify it. It's here's another option. Here's another choice. We're giving them a movement buffet, and
Yes.
they are choosing the movements that are right for them. And it's really honoring the spectrum of physical abilities as we get older, because as we get older, you meet one 70-year-old and you've met one 70-year-old. Like, that person's physical
Yes.
abilities are going to be completely different than somebody else that's 70 plus. So it's really recognizing those individuals and letting them choose, and not putting any shame around their decisions, and not getting so pigeonholed into this is what yoga is. You must
Mhm.
have your shoes off. You must get on the floor. That
Yeah.
might not be appropriate for everyone. And so just giving them that movement buffet.
Yeah. I mean, you said a lot of what I've thought about, and the way, the way you just mentioned it, if you've met one 7-year-old, you've met one 7-year-old, because it's exactly right. I had a good conversation with a judo coach who's teaching fall resiliency, and he was saying that he was given this sort of curriculum for how he's supposed to modify judo techniques to working with older populations. And he said as soon as his first group came in, he just took the curriculum, he just, like, literally he just threw it off. because all these assumptions about what people should be able to do, especially when you have this sort of top-down curriculum, there's top-down idea of what points of performance or best practices or whatever are, you just realize it's completely inappropriate. And that's what I learned very early as well, is that you sort of, what we like to do is we like to present movement challenges and then see what sort of solutions people present based on given, their own abilities. And, I mean, I think it's okay to say certain limitations, certain options become more constrained as you get older. And I remember when I was younger, I was thinking, well, everybody needs a squat and everyone needs to deadlift and a squat's supposed to look like this. And you get out in the real world and you realize it's like, I mean, is there even such thing as a universal squat? And sometimes I say that as a bit of an exaggeration, but I would never, for me personally, I wouldn't lead a class and I was saying, all right, guys, today we're going to squat and this is what the squat should look like. Instead, we try to lead with, well, what problems does this movement pattern solve and how can we work within our abilities? So yeah, I think you nailed it right there. Well, I guess I'd like to go back to your, your sort of evolution as a coach really quick, because what you just said really meshes with what I've discovered as well. But I think that this is something that people can sort of only discover if they've been coaching or training or sort of in the fitness industry for a while. I'd kind of like to know, where did you start? How did you get to where you are now? Because for most people, when they first start working with physical activity, they don't necessarily see themselves as working with older populations. So I'd just like to know a little bit more about how you got where you are today.
Yeah, so I've been in the industry for some time. I took some time off, but in college, I got my degree in kinesiology. I had a professor that geared me towards working to older adults, which wasn't originally what I thought I was going to do. And I got connected with the Silver Sneakers program, which is very prominent out here in the States. So I started teaching classes. This is in college. After college, I got my personal training certification, got my Group X certification. And a lot of it was, I did fitness. And so I thought I was going to make a career out of fitness. And a lot of people get into this, with that kind of route. And I quickly realized that it's so much more than teaching somebody how to squat. It's so much more than giving them an exercise program. But I really enjoyed working with older adults, and I worked in a medical fitness center. So working with people with cardiovascular disease, COPD, things like that. And and that was really a rewarding experience because it gave me a different lens for physical activity. Like this was part of their rehab. Like this was getting them better, walking on the treadmill and doing some of these fitness activities that movement was very meaningful for them, and they could see themselves on this path of getting better. And so that's where like the true value of fitness and activity kind of really sunk in for me, because when you work with a younger population, it's really a lot about body image, and they're trying to exercise to look a certain way, and they want tone and all these things these words that we use, and burning fat and And I was into that too. Like I was totally into that. It's like, oh, I'm going to do this so my body looks a certain way, and our culture celebrates a certain body. And then I realized, I was working with older adults, and then I went back to like the whole gym thing and did personal training and group exercise. And I really realized how, for me personally, there was this toxicity around fitness. And there's almost like you are striving to be healthy to the point where it actually becomes unhealthy because you are so fixated on what you're eating, your exercise. If you're not near a gym, I was getting like anxious about it. How am I going to do my weight training? It just became an obsessive thing for me. And you're with people who are in that same mindset, because you go to teach an exercise class, just mostly women, and they're like, I need to work hard because I got to work off that whatever food I ate. And I totally understood it because I was in that same boat, but it didn't feel right for me. It felt like this was now something that had turned into something that was unhealthy, that I needed to distance myself from that. So I left fitness completely for a few years, did a job that was completely different than fitness. I still, exercised, did all those things, just wasn't in the industry as a fitness professional. And that distance, that space gave me some time to reflect and thinking, like, what was out of everything that I've done, what's been the most meaningful? And it was really working in that medical fitness center with, I mean, our average age of our um, membership there was 75, and it was all older adults, and that was what was the most meaningful for me. And it's like, how do I get back to that? Because I have this draw to teaching and sharing physical activity with people. It's just something I love to do, and
Yeah.
I couldn't deny that. And how do I do that in a way that I'm not hurting myself and getting obsessive about it? So I went back to a senior center and a senior living community, and taught classes there and started getting back into fitness. But again, it was with a population where I felt like physical activity had a different meaning to them, and then a younger population, and it's grown from there. And I realized I really want to dedicate my time, energy to serving this population. I left my other job,
Hmm.
and now I've just kind of really just sunk my teeth into this and talking about these things that I've had distance from the industry, to see like we need to be talking about the individual. Like there's
Yeah.
plenty of information on exercises to do, but we need to be taking a hard look at this industry when majority of people aren't physically active and they
Yeah.
don't have a good relationship with exercise, and we keep doing the same things in fitness and expecting different
Yes.
results.
Yes.
So now I'm coming back and I'm like, okay, if I'm seeing this, maybe I'm the person that needs to put a spotlight on this. And so that's what's led me to all the work that I'm doing right now.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, your story really maps over my own. I started off, I was a CrossFit coach for a long time, and I worked in sports and conditioning and all. Then like sort of, I don't know, executive, quite fancy gyms and things like that. And honestly, that stuff was never as meaningful as it was just sort of working with the people who weren't fitness people. Like you said, it's so easy to kind of get into this bubble. And I guess there's lots of words we can use. People can talk about orthorexic behaviors and things like that. But your sense of, I guess I'll use the word normal as a shorthand. Your sense of what's normal becomes work. In that, like you said, I know you mean that. I would go on vacation and be like, okay, well, do I have places I can sprint? Can I run? Is there a gym nearby? Things like that. If I don't work out for a few days, what's going to happen? I need to eat the special food. Whatever sort of food beliefs that I had at the time. That just kind of evolved with the industry. Um, and then a similar thing is, it's time to get out. So I worked in public health for a while, and then like you, I think I realized that actually, working with people at an individual level, or maybe at a community level, is a better way of thinking about it for me. Um, just ended up being some of the most meaningful work, in a way that in public health it's too easy just to think of things on the population level. Kind of reduce. You never work with individuals. Everything is statistics, which is great as a whole, but maybe not as rewarding as kind of having those individual stories. So you came back and you started working with mature populations again, but you kind of had this time away from the industry, and just looking at what you do and the way you approach physical activity, it feels like you sort of attack the problem differently than, say, like a 25-year-old trainer might do, or someone who's just recently gotten qualified. So if you're working with a group of people, how do you start to make sense of, you know, providing physical opportunities for people? What does a class with you look like, depending on, obviously, on different populations? How do you make sense of what you want to focus on? What sort of movement you want to elicit? Can you just kind of talk me through how you plan your classes, what they might look like?
Yeah, so it depends on the setting of the class. So, I mean, I work at the senior center, and it is very much a traditional exercise class. The That population there likes a traditional group exercise class, the low impact class,
Yeah.
and the resistance training, and that's cool. Like I still have a foot solidly in fitness, and I love that myself. Like I love me a good low impact class. I love step aerobics. I love all that stuff. I love weight
Yeah.
training, and this is a group that likes, and so
Yes.
I'm happy to deliver to those people. And it's really a lot about like naming classes and how you describe your class. So it's stamina,
Mhm.
strength, and stability, and it is more of a high level class for that population. And then my senior living community, I do a fall preparedness class,
Mm.
And I'm very specific about that language. And one of the things that has really shaped how I delivered classes was getting exposed to a program called PK Silver, which I know
Yes.
Shelby has talked about that. And it is a parkour for the over 50 population. And that blew my mind open into all these different ways that we can be giving movement options to people and just a different way of delivering a class. It was completely different than a traditional group exercise class where everyone is doing these movements together.
Mhm.
And I thought there is like some real gold here that
Mm.
we don't address in fitness. And it was really a lot about expanding movement options. Like so
Mm.
much of fitness is kind of robotic
Yes.
and but how are we teaching people to just move in their existing environment? How are we helping navigate, like you said, like problem solving? How do you get it from point A to point B? Because all these things happen in environment where we need to duck under things, we need to step over things, we need to maybe get on our knees and crawl. I mean, these things happen, and
Yeah.
but a lot of it really overlapped with fall resiliency because now people have more options, they're giving themselves more options to maneuver around things and they're more aware of their environment. So that completely changed how I delivered classes. And I brought this to I taught it online and I worked with the gentleman that created the curriculum I shadowed him for probably like 2 years, which
Wow.
I think I needed that much
Yeah.
time to get exposure to this different way of moving
Mhm.
to really open my mind up to getting out of the box that
Yeah.
fitness is. And so I brought this to a senior living community, and it was really like scaling this to a crowd that had walkers and canes, and some were in wheelchairs. Some had, were starting that a little bit of cognitive decline, which presents its own challenges. But
Mm.
so that class it's really all about how we're navigating our environment. We use pool noodles. We have helicopter noodles where they have to duck under the
Yeah.
helicopter noodles. They have partners that need to that are putting the noodle down by their feet. They need to step over. They need to be able to react to their environment. We take it out of the classroom. We go in the hallway. We go downstairs. And so we go outside. So it's taking them in all these different environments and getting them used to moving in different ways. And so that has really influenced a lot of what I've done. And I interject that some of what I do at the senior center. But I think it's just a really powerful exercise, regardless of what age you are at,
Yeah.
to just be exposed to a variety of movements and not have any special equipment. Like you're
Yeah.
just using your environment. And I think it's just so refreshing to see
Mm.
something different offered.
I think people react really well to not having special equipment, and we'll talk about this in a bit as well. But just, when it comes to issues of confidence and capability, there's a lot of baggage tied into fitness industry and specialized fitness equipment, and you see it all the time where you'll see a mom who will have like, an 8 kg kid, slung to her hip, or like will carry a bag that probably weighs like 11 or 12 pounds and not really think about it. But the moment you give them the little pink dumbbell or the smallest kettlebell, all of a sudden, sometimes you see just people sort of crumble for whatever reason because they think, oh, am I using this right? Or, have I remembered all the steps and how I'm supposed to do this movement? And when you get people outside, and I guess I'd like to talk about games in the future as well. But when you get people playing games, there's very little thought about, am I doing this right? They just do it, and that's one of the magic things about it. You said something really that I think is important when you're talking about people liking and having expectations about exercise classes. And we talked the other day. I was saying, oh yeah, I mean, there was a part in my life where I had a membership to a gym, and they had all the Les Mills classes, and they had the body pump class there. And I love body pump,
Mhm.
it's like silly, and they play, just like goofy, fun music, and you just kind of go and you just do it, and people are counting, and it's great. But there's this face validity where you sort of have to meet people where their expectations are, because you can't just, if someone's coming in and they think that they're gonna have like a body pump class or a Zumba class or something like that, and then you try to pull them too far away from what their comfort level is in terms of, well, is this exercise? Sometimes it is hard to wrap people's brains, for people to wrap their brains around it. So I've definitely found that it is good, I think, sometimes to lead with people's expectations and what they think an exercise class is going to be. And then sometimes just sneaking in problem solving, sneaking in, some more dynamic movement, or, working with movement freedom and things like that. I would like to talk to you about fall preparedness and fall resiliency programs, because um, I think they're really important, and I think they are sort of like the nexus of a lot of what you talk about in terms of the language that we use, narratives that people have about themselves, how sort of people fit into society at large, because I think falling is a very complex issue, and the language we use around it is very complex. So I'd really like to just give you some space to kind of talk about how you think about falling, sort of what it means in terms of people's lifestyle, I should say life cycle, um, and just sort of how you think about and how you try to address it.
Yes. So falling is something that, I mean, has to be approached with all humans, but we definitely take a bigger focus on it with the older adults. And out here, fall prevention is, and that is a term you hear all the time. I mean, it's just so basic.
Yeah.
Fall prevention programs. And I think simply just by using that language, fall prevention, it's sending this message of don't fall. Whatever you
Yes.
do, don't fall.
Yes.
And if you fall, you have failed because you were
Yes.
supposed to prevent falling. And that language is used so much. And I don't think it's empowering for
No.
people. Whereas if you say fall resiliency or fall preparedness, you are now prepared to do, like in case of emergency,
Yes.
you know how to have the movement skills to fall. And I think it's just that language alone is a lot more empowering. And how we talk about falling. So much of the time we talk about the fall rates of people over 60 and what happens and the death and decline that comes when
Sure.
you fall. And I don't know that that is helping people with their fear of falling. I think for those of us that can offer movement programs, healthcare providers, that we can do things and have interventions to help people, um, you know, prevent falls, yes, but also have the skills to fall to help with that frightening statistic. I think it's helpful for us to know that, but I don't think when we talk about those statistics to older adults, I don't know that it helps people feel empowered to take the actions to be better equipped for a fall. I think in many cases, it people want to cocoon themselves even more.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh my gosh, I'm 70. If I fall, I'm going to die. And that's a lot of our languages around that. So having programs where again, it is all about that the language that we're using, um, so that you feel like, we are all human beings. We are all going to fall. Like this is going to happen to us. And while there's things that we can do to prevent it, like life happens. It's just part of being a human. And so let's make ourselves better equipped to do that. And I think it's just empowering them. Like, I think you can do this thing. I think you can fall and actually rebound and not hurt yourself significantly to the point where you're going to start that decline, but you can come back from it. So that language is important. And I don't even use the word fall a lot in my class. It's like, this is how we're going to be upright. This is what we're going to do to be stable. This is how we're going to develop our strength. And using a lot of those words rather than don't fall.
Yeah.
It's what if you're on the ground? How do we get back up? It's all about that empowering language. And a lot of time in my classes, I give people a silicone bracelet that I had made, and it
Sure.
says strong and resilient.
Cool.
And because that's what I want them to believe about themselves. And so I use that language with them, and I want them to see that and think that about themselves. Because if somebody is approaching life thinking that they are strong and resilient, that language alone, I think, is going to put them in the mindset that they can
Yes.
deal with anything that comes their way. And that's what it starts with. It starts with the brain. It starts with the fear and their thoughts. And it so much is like the environment that we put them in and how we talk to people can help address that. It's not simply the physical activities we give them. Of course, that's important, but it's the environment that we create for them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I've noticed the same thing because we do a lot of getting up and down from the ground, and we do a lot of balance work, and we do a lot of play and things, and it's received really, really well. But I've been thinking about a lot of the language that I use, where the moment one mentions falling and this idea of falling, you see how people just sort of really tense up. And there is obviously a sensitivity in older populations because I think you're right. They have, developed this fear around the word fall, the concept of falling. So I really like that language of resiliency and preparedness. And you sort of alluded to it, but it's one of the things I think about as well. And it's one of these really just powerful ideas where once you see it, you kind of can't unsee it, which is, these idea of fear avoidance cycles, so for example, obviously the fear of falling cycle, people develop this fear of falling. So they stop engaging in activities where they might fall. And that means they stop developing and maintaining all the capacities that would help them if they did fall, like balance, reaction time, possibly bone density, strength, things like that. And then you see it again and again and again, it's the same thing. I hope to have some chats in the future with some people who work in pain and nociception and things like that. But we also have that pain avoidance cycle as well, where people hurt themselves. They develop this fear of pain in certain positions or by using certain parts of their body, and then they stop using them. And again, you avoid, and you see how people, their lives get smaller, they start to contract. And a lot of, I think what we're both trying to do is to try to create these sort of virtuous, positive growth cycles, um, which is why I think the concepts of, resiliency or, people don't use it so much anymore, but, anti-fragility was the big word that people were using a few years back. And I think, yeah, I'm like you, I just try to use positive words as much as I can, because it just works so much better. And again, I think this is why playing games are so important, because it's very hard to be worried about things when you have a good time. Just like it's hard to, if you're working with younger populations who have issues about being self-conscious and confidence and things like that, you get them playing games and they sort of don't really care about how they're standing or trying to look cool. Once you get those games going, you have that right level of distraction so they could focus on things. So how do you approach it if you are working with a group and you decide that, at least internally, you want to start working on fall capacity, fall preparedness, things like that? How would you bring it up with a group, and how do you start the process of getting them comfortable down and up from the ground, and what sort of things do you focus on first?
So I look at all those aspects of things that we know that make people more fall resilient. Fear
Yeah,
is a big one. Fear is
yeah,
a really big one. And that really impacts people's movement patterns if they're fearful. And looking at things that we know, like timed up and go. So we know that people's walking speed
hmm,
impacts, that is an indicator of their fear of falling, and it can measure their risk of falling. How strong their feet are. These are all like physical aspects that we know that impact someone's if that makes them more susceptible to falling. So I look at that and I think, okay, how can we make this fun? Like, how can we gamify this? And with fear being a big one, it's like, how can we set up um obstacle courses that are very low risk for them?
yeah,
And so they start building this confidence that they can move in different ways. And so with my senior living folks, I use a lot of tape and a lot of
yeah,
chalk
yes,
because it's creating a one-dimensional environment. Like if they don't step on the tape line, if they don't step on the chalk line, there's no repercussions from that. It's
hmm,
all flat ground.
yeah,
And so that's a way to address fear, is to create a obstacle course that is very low risk. And in the senior living facility, they have a handrail on the wall, so that's always nearby. They can always grab that. So it's really giving them an environment where they can fail safely. They don't step on the tape. They feel like everything's within their stability is within grasp. Um, so gamifying that, and then looking at things like, like I said, like we know walking speed is an indicator of someone's fall risk. How do we get people to walk faster without saying, you need to walk faster? Because if you walk slow, it measures your mortality risk, which is like a thing. It is a real
yeah,
thing, but like,
yeah.
that's not inspiring to people.
No, no,
Um, so I have them do relays.
hmm,
So one relay is they have to put a newspaper on their chest and they have to walk so fast that the newspaper sticks to them.
that's very good.
So, so it's an objective, and it's a task based, and and that is a lot of like games and parkour. It's like, how do you do this thing? And they have to figure that out. Oh,
Yeah.
I have to walk at a certain speed, at this speed, so this newspaper sticks to me. And I'm not saying you need to walk faster. Like they just figure that out.
Yeah.
And same thing with relays is that I've had them, in the senior living community where they're lined up on a really long hallway. And, they're not that far apart, maybe 15, 20 feet apart. And they have to walk to their next person and maybe pour out a cup of water, take it to the next person and down the line. And they're being
That's great.
timed.
Yeah.
So now it also became a dual task, which we know dual tasking is helping with that,
Mhm.
that cognitive component of people having to do two things at once. And so, but now they have an objective. Like now, as a team, they need to move faster. They need to get this task done and beat their time. So they get two to three chances to do this relay as a team. But it's still giving people that autonomy that there's people that don't want to go fast. Like they have their cane, they have their cup of water, and they don't want to, and that's okay. That's
Yeah.
okay because now this is a team effort and there are people that are going to want to go faster. So as a team, we are doing this activity together. And so that addresses that fast movement walking pattern. And then stronger feet. We know people that have stronger feet are, tend to be more stable. How do we work stronger feet? Is like one of the things that I do is talk about ninja feet, being on the balls of our feet, lifting our heels, not, lifting them really high, but
Yeah.
just hovering your heels. So now we are sneaky ninjas and we're walking through our environment like sneaky ninjas, like you're going to sneak up and scare somebody.
Yeah.
But then you start offering up other movements like, well, oh my gosh, you can start playing this game of pretend, which kids do all the time. Oh my gosh, did we hear something behind us? Look over your shoulder. So now they're mobilizing their head and neck.
Yeah.
Now there's more awareness of their environment and they're on their feet. So they're working those feet muscles. So how can we put these things into like a playful environment? And I don't talk to them about like, this is why it's good to have strong feet. I will say like, this is helping us strong feet. And when we have strong feet, we stay more upright,
Yeah.
but not like giving them a whole educational spiel about it.
Yeah.
So I think it's, looking at those things and seeing like, okay, how do we gamify this and make it fun? Because that is what's really missing a lot in physical activity programs, which I know you guys are all about, which I love,
Cool.
which is why I love your work, is nobody talks about this. Nobody talks about like, how are we going to make things fun? It's like, do this thing.
Yeah.
And because it's good for you.
Exactly. Yeah. The moment you're relying on like willpower, this idea that something is good means it's only going to work for a small percentage of the population. Again, we were sort of talking about the weirdness of being in a gym, and I think we mentioned this in our last conversation, but if someone goes to a personal trainer and they say, okay, well, you start measuring out your food and counting your calories and prepping everything ahead of time, we can't hold that up as this idea of what people should be doing because only a very small percentage of the population is wired to count their calories and do all this stuff. And, not everyone is motivated by the idea of increasing their back squat by 5% or whatever. So yeah, I mean, you're right. Exactly. It needs to be fun. It needs to be social. And that's the way that the habits are going to be formed. That's how you're going to embed it into their life. I think about falling because we also talk about this idea of independence, and living independently. And you had an interesting blog article that I hadn't considered before, where you were sort of talking about the language that people use around self-sufficiency and independence, and how in some ways it can be a double-edged sword, especially when working with older populations. I was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit, because I thought it was a really interesting take, and it's something I hadn't considered before.
Yeah. So a lot of times in fitness, especially people talk about maintaining independence. You want to squat so you can maintain your independence and get up and down from the toilet and the chair and all that. And so much of it is selling around maintaining independence. And I think that that's something our culture highly values is being independent.
Yes.
And so what happens when we have an illness or something that that now we have this dependency factor? And that it's not necessarily pathology or illness or something like that makes us dependent. For some people, they like dependency. It gives them connection to other people. It makes them feel safe. They are now, maybe they've kind of unloaded some of these responsibilities of being an adult and having to make decisions, now they have somebody that they can rely on. So for some people, dependency is a choice.
Yeah.
And we shame that. We shame that a lot. Like, you need to be independent. You need to live on your own. This is our virtue. And and when we're selling fitness, we're always selling that independency. And
Sure.
it's like we're not stepping back and looking at the individual. And I talk about a specific couple that I know in mind. And the gentleman is he relies a lot on his wife for daily activities. And that's the relationship that they have. Um, and for a long time, I I didn't like that this couple is very close to me. I'm like, why don't you work? Why don't you move more? Why don't you, try to be able to tie your shoes? It was like, it got to me. But then it's like honoring the individual. Like, that person feels more connected to to other people, and he likes knowing that he can rely on somebody. So instead of judging that and saying that he's not upholding the same virtues that I uphold and a lot of our culture upholds, it's stepping back and saying, like, well, what does that person value? Like, it's not going to be independence, and that needs to be, it needs to be some level of acceptance around that. Um, and figuring out what's meaningful for that person, because independence is not their highest,
Yeah.
their value. So again, it's just looking at the individuals that we're working with and not
Yep.
assuming that they want what we want. And a lot of times we do that in fitness all the time. We assume that people want what we want, and so we sell to
Yes.
people that want the same things that we want, and which is fine. Like, we're just selling to the same group of people.
Yeah.
But how do we address that 80-85%? And it has to be a different message. It has to be looking at those people and what's meaningful for them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, and I get just to clarify, it's that stat that seems to be true around most Western countries at any one time. 85% of the population isn't going to engage in, scare quote, exercise or have a gym membership, even though obviously they could be getting physical activity in all kinds of other ways. Yeah, I really liked that blog post because, one of the things we try to do in building up this community is sort of like this reciprocity, which is this relationship that people like doing things for other people, and they like having things done for them. And I think that's really important. I found that one of the things that's so important if you want to build a fitness community is people need, I think, to feel useful and helpful, and other people want to know that there's other people that will help them out. And so much with the traditional fitness model, where it's you're providing a service for people, it sort of prevents that reciprocity from growing, into like a sort of full-fledged community setting where you have these elements of, mutual aid and things like that I think you see at a community level. I always think, no man is an island, no person is an island. And I think you're right. It's especially true in America, where this idea that people are individuals first and foremost. And I think a lot of times will kind of have a pernicious effect on the way that we think about capabilities and freedom, this idea that you have to be able to do everything. And also, that everyone needs their own fitness equipment. There's an article I read a few years back. It was just this person who was walking through London, and certain neighborhoods in London, every single family home has their own mini trampoline in the back, So you go to one home, mini trampoline, these are little small garden lots, another one. And in like a neighborhood of 30 houses, you could see like 30 individual trampolines. And you think, gosh, everyone could be sharing these trampolines, And I think about that all the time as well. This idea that everyone needs their own set of kettlebells, or everyone needs their own set of wherever. And that just sort of assumes that this is something to be done by yourself with your headphones in, rather than in the context of other people. And I think, what you're saying about independence, I think, is really important too, because it's like, we all sort of make sense of ourselves in the context of the people around us. And I think that's often forgotten, going back to this idea of individuals and also the relationships that they have. You've spoken a lot about the language, I guess, or maybe even the bias that the fitness industry sort of has against older populations, sometimes overt, sometimes subtle, and it shows up in all kinds of different ways. And I think that's been one of the themes that's really shown up in a lot of your work. So I guess if someone who's listening to this is someone who really believes in promoting physical activity and wants to build some kind of physical movement community, they want to get people in their neighborhood moving, what should they consider if they're going to be working with older adults? And what are some of the pitfalls that people often fall into when they're working with older populations?
I think a lot of times people that want to work with older adults, there's very specific language that people use around offering physical activities. And this is where I see ageism show up in physical fitness, but also in just general physical activities. If you're trying to cater to that demographic, it's silver, senior,
Yes.
gold, chair-based, easy, safe, low impact. And these are all words that we use to create programs for older adults and to make it quote unquote, inviting for older adults. But it's age siloing people for physical activities. It's basically saying, because you are older, these are the activities that you should do. This is our chair-based, this is our senior fitness program, and it's chair-based. And, that's what you do because you're older. That's kind of what our culture says.
Yeah.
And, again, not overtly, but it is, that's what it is. And then we don't show people of all ages doing a variety of activities. It's like, you're an older adult, this is your chair, these are your tiny dumbbells, and this is the program for you, or this is a modified program for you. But who's to say anybody at any age wouldn't want that program based on the physical condition that they're in? Maybe they have a broken foot. Maybe they have, I've seen women pregnant women in a silver sneakers chair-based class because they felt based on their condition, like that was the best class for them.
Yeah.
So if we just take away age entirely from our class descriptions and our offerings and just simply state like this program is for people that want to fill in the blank, work on balance, stability, and you can offer a class that is addressing those things that typically older adults tend to be a little bit more concerned about: balance, stability, strength, and let people self-select. And if a 20-year-old wants to do that class, cool. And if an 80-year-old wants to do that class, cool. Like, we're just addressing, we're giving a physical activity opportunity for people that want a certain thing. And has nothing to do with age. And I think that's where we start to create more intergenerational programs and not pigeonhole people into specific programs on age alone. Like, that should not be a thing. And but it also speaks to what we expect of older adults. Like, if we are saying all of our older adult programs are easy, low impact, chair based, that's saying like that's what we expect you to be doing because you're older. And that gets internalized now. Like, older adults, like that's so part of our culture that now they start to believe that, because I'm such and such age, like I shouldn't be doing high impact stuff. I need to be in a chair. And they believe that.
Yeah.
And it completely impacts their physical abilities and their fitness level based on the things that we're putting out there. And then they're not being represented in other activities. So many times we see younger people doing specific activities. Younger people are doing parkour. Younger people are doing hip hop dancing. Younger people are rock climbing. Who's to say an older person can do that?
Yeah.
But it's, again, like, we're not showing that. There's no images of that. So I think the way you invite people is you neutralize the language and you show images of people doing those activities, which, again, you guys are so great at. Like, I can't remember the name of your outdoor program, but you have these great images of older people playing outside. That's what sells people. That's what says, oh, that's for me. There's people like me doing that class. It's not in the language of senior, silver. It's simply in the images and the way you describe your class.
Yeah. It's one of the things we tried really hard, for Nature Moves, to show, that older people are capable of doing fun and interesting things. We want to make sure it's fun. We try to make sure none of our classes would have that sort of passive sitting down in a chair. And I always use chair yoga as an example, not because I think it's bad. And I think that for certain groups, I think it is probably the best option. But at the same time, it always just seems like such a potentially missed opportunity, especially when I see people who are healthy and capable walk into a class, put their bags down, engage with the environment around them, and then sit down in a chair and do chair yoga. And it's one of those things, like, if you absolutely need to, if that's the starting point that we use in order to maintain or hopefully progress and regain some capabilities, then that's great. But just for chair yoga to be the default, um, I think it really feels like a missed opportunity. We're
Absolutely.
getting close on time now, so I really I kind of wanted to talk. I guess a two-pronged question is what is it that you are optimistic about? What are some trends that you've seen or conversations that you've heard um, that make you feel optimistic about physical activity, the fitness industry, things like that? And I'd also like to spend a little time just kind of talking about your future plans and future projects that you have. So I guess first one is what are you optimistic about? And then second part is what are some of your future plans?
Yeah. So, what I'm optimistic about is the change of language about
Mm,
fall resiliency, fall preparedness. Again, this is something that my community is bringing to their communities. So, I think this idea is starting to spread and how we talk about falling and using that language. So, I feel optimistic that that is going to catch on more and we're going to get away from fall prevention and more towards fall resiliency and fall preparedness. I feel very optimistic about that. And I feel optimistic about getting a more mature population into this fold of creating physical activity opportunities. And this is people that I've interviewed is like, this is the group that I think we need to be tapping into to offer programs, classes, things like that. So I've interviewed a lady in her 70s that's teaching low flying trapeze to older
mm,
adults all the way into their 90s. And I have
wow.
a gentleman that is doing rock climbing for people over 50. And I think that demographic is actually leading the way
Yeah.
in creating innovative programs because they do not see themselves represented in the traditional fitness offerings. And they are kind of, when they offer those programs, they're basically saying, like, this is for you, and this is a way that you enter this activity. They're not having any age restrictions
Mm,
around these activities. So I really think we need to be looking to this population to be leaders in this space. I think there's a lot of power in that. So I feel optimistic about that. And in regards to future plans, um, I I'm working. So PK Silver, the program that I got
yeah.
trained in, that was for parkour for older adults, it is no longer offering trainings, and the company's been on pause. And so I'm working with a group of coaches. Shelby Copeland was one of them that you had on your podcast to resurrect a program with a
Mhm.
parkour company here in the States and have a curriculum for coaches to be able to give to be able to offer parkour to a spectrum of abilities and being able to work with people that are older adults that might have, joint replacements
Mm,
and, they've accumulated other injuries. So I feel really hopeful that that
yeah.
is out in the new year. And I'm continuing to work on my community and building a network of people that are committed to working with the older adult population and having opportunities to gather in person and online and really having a space that we are gathering differently with our peers. It's not just like, I'm the expert, I'm going to teach you about this, but how do we learn from each other?
Yes.
Everybody's coming with their own experiences, mentors that they've had, perspectives. How can we create spaces online and in person that we can learn from our peers? So that is something else that's in the works. And then lastly, I'm working with a little task force with my community of addressing ageism in the fitness
Mm,
industry and giving a path forward. Like, how do we create a better path that isn't all about age and all the things that I've talked about, but really kind of shining a light on how we can do things
mm.
differently.
Yeah, I'm so excited about the resurrection of PK Silver because it's one of those courses that I was trying to join for forever. And I was, I was actively trying to get in touch with them to see if we could get in the next one. I didn't hear from them. I didn't hear from them. And then I realized that, well, something must have happened to the organization. So when Shelby said that you and her and a few others were working to resurrect it, I think that's great because it is just such an amazing program. Some of the videos and the teachings that have come out of that, I think it'll be great to have that and also build upon whatever else best practices people have learned on. I don't know if you're allowed to talk on it. Would you keep it as PK Silver, or do you think you might
No,
change the name on it?
it would be a completely different company
It
that
would.
would be housing the program. And I don't, yeah, so it's still in the works. Yeah, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be PK Silver, it would be something different. But yeah, the hope is that it'll be resurrected early in the new year.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, good. Best of luck with that. And yeah, just really thanks for your time. I've written down loads of notes here, so I've got lots of other things I need to follow up on and think about. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Andrew.
It's a daily exercise. It's a daily exercise. It's a daily exercise.
Hello, welcome back to my kitchen. How did that go? Did you enjoy it? I thought it was fascinating. We've put a lot of links for what Andrew and Erin were talking about in their chats in the show notes. Have a look. And please, of course, leave comments and let us know how you found that episode. Please do check out Erin's Second Act Fit Pros podcast and community. They've just got some really good resources and really good ideas around inclusive physical activity for older populations. So next up, we have a chat with me and Andrew, and that is coming out next week. We will see you then. Goodbye.